Alrighty, welcome everybody. It's our 8th meeting of year 2, quarter 3. Benson Russell worked on lots and lots of games. You've been in the industry for quite a while. We met when we were on the Medal of Honor Airborne team, I believe.
Yes.
The question often is like, how did you find your way into design then without it being a lateral move? Because I think a lot of people come to it thinking that they need to first be an engineer, find their way into the design track.
I'm way back when the industry was still like, just a little thing. I come from the modding days where I did a couple of Quake and Doom levels, and a guy wanted to found a company, the 2015 back in the day, and he saw a couple of my levels, and that's how I got into it. And so I've been doing it for about 20 years, close to that, something like that. So that's obviously it's way different nowadays. There's a lot more people coming into it. There's a lot of people, there's college. The idea of like taking a class for this was laughed at. It only took probably until like the last decade, I think, because remember colleges started in like the early 2000s, and I think most companies didn't really take them seriously because it was like, well, what are you going to teach them aside from like programming and art? Like, how are you going to learn design? How are you going to learn all this stuff? But now that, obviously they've had their time and they've proven themselves and good students have come from it, I think now that's definitely a way people are getting in. But I didn't have to deal with the whole like, oh, come in as an engineer and then like transfer over to design. It's like, designers were needed because it was like this was Texas-based type of studios working in Quake technology, so it kind of worked out.
Right. Well, it was very hands-on. It was very level building, right? Very much building spaces and ambushes and building.
Oh no,
right?
we did everything. Yeah. A designer back then had to build the level. You had to art the level. You didn't make the textures, but you were given the textures and you had to apply them. You had to do the lighting, you had to do the sound implementation, and you had to do the gameplay as well, and then any other systems design and stuff like that. So you were everything was all on your plate. So I'm actually really happy it's gotten a lot more specialized because, there's just no way. There's no way you can do all that stuff anymore unless you're just willing to kill yourself.
Do you remember correctly that era too was still kind of pre-static meshes? That a lot of level design was like you were placing every single wall as opposed to anymore, like right. Oftentimes you'll drop in an entire model that environment designer built in Maya or whatever. You were kind of arting up the space with the brushes, weren't you?
No, and it's still that way even on the Call of Duty games because they're still using that tech.
Oh,
right?
okay.
Like COD evolved, the first COD evolved from the Wolfenstein tech, if I remember correctly, and then they've just been, they've run with it ever since and made it their own and constantly revamped it. But they still use, they actually have two level designers. They have layout designers that also have to make the level look pretty, and then they have the scripters, which is more what I've fallen into these days. But yeah, you actually, you use brushes and milt it all, and then or sometimes you'd go into Maya and build something like when Naughty Dog was like the first house where I went to, where it was like, oh, I only do block mesh, and I had to do it in Maya, and then all the artists make it all look pretty, and I was like, oh, thank God for this. There's too much time. It's like it's crazy, especially with how like there's no way I can make something look the way that it needs to look these days on like a full AAA title. It's
right.
Like I don't understand shaders and all that craziness. I know enough to do about it when someone's like, hey, make that thing glow. I'm like, okay, I'll talk to a programmer and figure out what commands I need to use or what channels I need to pipe into or something. But other than that, it's like I'm not going to make this shader. I don't know anything about this.
Right.
So it's thankful for specialization in that regard.
The size of teams you're on, right? You have an entire team of designers you're working with typically, right? So I'd just be curious because that's obviously so much bigger than the scale we work at. What sort of things day to day go into that kind of work with your coworkers, what types of ways do you document, do you communicate?
I mean, every company is different. I would say the companies I would say that are going in what I consider to be a good direction are moving away from documentation. I mean, they're minimizing it. So there might be like a wiki page with some stuff, but for the most part, everyone's talking to everybody. And there might be a producer or lead designer or game director or something that, there's some vision holder and then maybe some people that help guide the vision. But for the most part, everyone's just constantly communicating. Like at Naughty Dog, there was no one with the title producer. All the designers were acting producers. So our job was to, we get a task. We had to go round up all the other disciplines. And then it was our job to make sure that we figured out what it took to get it done, how much time it was going to take, report back into whoever needed to be reported to. If it was going to go beyond scope, we had to talk to them. And then we also had to do our work of implementation. But we saw that thing from, prototyping concept through to completion. We oversaw that. But it was a great way to work because it was just, everyone's always talking to everybody. You go to someone's desk and it was expected. Like the programmers had a really fast way to dump. I just remember it was called Control T was the hotkey that did it. I forgot what the actual Visual Studio thing is, but they had a way where they could take code, and as long as the module was in a certain state, they could dump it directly into a PS4 while it was running, and it'd take like 30 seconds. So yeah, we'd sit at a programmer's desk for like 30 minutes sometimes tuning a system that was in their hands, with them, and that was expected. Versus I know, some of the older places like EA would tend to frown upon that, at least back in the day. Nowadays, I think people are starting to realize it's like, yeah, the rigid process structure, that's not how you make a game. It's got to be like this organized chaos. It's going to be fast and fluid, that kind of thing.
Which is actually kind of a relief here, because that's close to when we're under very tight time constraints there, but it's kind of close-ish to like how we do it. But it's actually reassuring, because I sometimes wonder, like, okay, we don't really do game design documents here. We don't have those Bibles or whatever. Yeah. But I didn't know if that was just a product of our scale, or if that's just really like, sounds like AAA isn't really doing that anymore either.
I think there might be some studios that are still doing it, but like even in the last COD, yeah, there were documents, and there were like I said, there was wiki. There were some documents that were made in the beginning just to get it started, but nobody maintains them. And even if there's somebody to maintain them, like I can't say how many times somebody didn't go look there. The moment somebody said, "Go," didn't you read the document? Everyone's just like, "I'm not going to read that thing. I don't have time for this." So yeah, it's pretty much nobody would maintain it. So it's kind of like it was a starting point. Tried to keep it very minimal, one or a couple pages, just the highlights, and then if there was maps and stuff like that or ideas. But it's one of those problems of like, if you try to do everything on paper, you're not going to know what it's like until you actually get it in the game. And it's like a writer. It's like until you put words on the page, you have no idea how it's going to play. So why waste all this time trying to plan it out perfectly at the start when it's just going to change like crazy?
So in a similar question and specific to the field, so in my narrow slice of time that I was kind of visiting AAA life, there was still in that pipeline, at least with the company I was with, that the beat doc, they would be an overhead map in Illustrator or whatever before we do anything in engine, in environment, in brushwork, etc. Do you still keep that as part of your process where you like to do the overhead layouts and things, or do you go straight into playable space in editor kind of stuff?
Usually that's up to the designer. And I think for me, it depends on the complexity of the space. So, if you're talking like a COD level, that's pretty much, linear corridor, maybe the corridor's a little wide or something like that. I'll sketch a layout, or most people sketch a layout on paper or something. But honestly, the nice thing about the tool set, it's just much faster to just block mesh and just get it going. And then, because even on paper, I can say, oh, I want this to be 100-meter space. And by the time you see that in person, you're like, you put a little statue all the way up, and you're like, oh, that guy's way too far away. I need to reduce, or maybe it's too close, and I need to lengthen the space. Like you just don't. It's hard to get a sense for that on paper. So usually, if it's a paper representation, it's going to be like macro level, just like, oh yeah, here's a representation of like there's a space here, and this event is going to happen in it, and then it's going to lead to these two spaces, and these events are going to happen in it. So it'll keep it kind of like high level like that. The only time I think it would get it gets a little more noodly is when you start to have more open world type games where you're going to crisscross the space multiple times. And each time you come back, something different's going to happen. Then you might want to be like, oh, okay, well, when I come back on second path, this part needs to be shut down. And then these guys have to come in here, and these platforms need to be whatever, is needed. So then you might get a little more expressive with the document just because you have to track so much more in your head. And that's when it gets harder. But designing a space, I'm almost always more like, just give me the editor. I'll just, just tell me where I have to come in at and where I have to exit at to meet up with anybody else. And then, just plan it in 3-dimensional space and see how it goes. Because until you can feel it out, you're just grasping.
Right.
Trying to guess it.
Awesome. Well, I want to mention too. So I'm happy to just kind of keep rolling with questions, kind of podcast style, because part of what I've done plenty of times. But if other people have questions, by all means, feel free to type them. Feel free to kind of like chime in. We're certainly I'm not the only question asker able here. If you guys want to chime in with questions. Lots of the games you worked on were I don't want to say pure shooters, but very much combat oriented.
Mostly shooters, yeah.
But you've also, I mean, Last of Us obviously involves plenty of puzzles and so on. Do you have a preference between puzzle design, combat design? Is it kind of like, do you approach the spaces in a different way, the same way?
Yeah, I'd say you approach them differently. I mean, it's, to me, my primary role at Naughty Dog was I was the main combat designer. So I did all the combat on like Uncharted 2, Uncharted 3. I did all the human combat on Uncharted or on The Last of Us. Matthew did all the infected combat, and I didn't ship. I was partway through production or pre-production on Uncharted 4, and then that's when I went to Infinity War. But it's also, even though that was kind of my primary focus, I still did a lot of other stuff. So you'd still like, I'm still putting in scripted sequences. I'm still putting in like custom boss logic, puzzles, whatever's needed. It's nice to have that, get a chance to work on a bunch of stuff rather than just be fixed in one pipe the whole time. But I'm always looking at it like, what does this space need? So yeah, puzzle spaces are going to be designed for whatever the requirements of the puzzle are, versus combat's going to be designed for their combat. And then even then, I want to take it further in terms of like, well, is there an overarching story or an overarching story? Is there a beat on how we want to make the player feel at this certain point in time? And if that's the case, then try to match up whatever that gameplay is with whatever we want the player to feel at that moment. So if it's supposed to be, best example I know of is Uncharted 2, when you're in the war-torn Nepal, and you're meeting Chloe for this first time. It's like really sunny, you're adventuring, you're doing some combat. And then as you get to the top of this hotel, it's like it's dark and stormy in the distance. It's like a foreshadowing. And then you start working your way down into the streets. It gets more claustrophobic. You meet up with Elena and Jeff, the cameraman. Storm clouds are moving in, and then eventually you find this, the temple, whatever you're supposed to go through. Temple's really dark and like mysterious, and eventually you get into it and you realize that Elena and the cameraman were left out in the front, and they get ambushed, and all of a sudden you're having to grind your way back through, not knowing if they're alive, and you're fighting these really tight spaces. You come out, now it's raining. The cameraman's been shot, so we even limit your mobility to the point where now you have to help him. So all you have is a pistol, and you're moving really slowly. You have to rely on your friends. All these trucks and turrets are coming in, and it all culminates in the fact that that's Chloe betrays you at the end of that. And by the way, spoiler alert on a 10-year-old game. But all that matches the beats. We wanted the player to feel all that, so all that whole sequence is designed to flow with the story to make you empathize with the characters and feel what's going on. So that to me is like the ultimate when you can do that kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
Any questions?
Yeah, we have some questions. So Mary kind of had her hand up first in the chat, so I'll defer to hers. When designing,
if you want to filter the questions, that'd be great.
Sure, yeah, I'll just read them out loud. +2 is good for some people to just listen to these, so it helps if I read them out loud. So Mary asked, when designing Last of Us, which came first, gameplay or the story, and at what point in development did story kind of form?
That was kind of like a Bruce and Neil thing. They went after we shipped Uncharted 2, they kind of went off and started dealing with it. It's not really a chicken and egg thing in that they kind of thought of it together. I mean, they formulated the universe they wanted. They know the kind of experience that they wanted, and then they knew what kind of gameplay that was going to come from that. But it still evolved over the course of the project. We knew it was going to be the kind of survival horror thing. We knew we wanted it set in this post-pandemic universe with, they're infected zombies. But it's like, don't use the word zombies, they're infected. But no, whatever. It's zombie-like creature. But they weren't supposed to be the premise. It was the idea is that it's this story. It's Ellie's story. As well as, and then Joel coming and finding himself and getting redemption, but it takes place in this exceptionally harsh universe, and that's kind of like the vehicle to tell the story in. So yeah, they kind of come about at the same time in that regard, but that doesn't mean there's, I think somebody said it earlier in the chat, I saw it briefly, is there isn't really necessarily a right and a wrong way for, there's no such thing as like, you must do it this way. Everyone works differently, and you have to figure out, and every project is different. You kind of have to figure out what works best for that. The only thing is if you're killing yourself and you're going down to the wire and you're just, working 20-hour days, 7 days a week, trying to figure something out, you probably could have done something better. But aside from that, it's like, the good product is that resonates with everyone is the right end, as the end goal.
Gotcha. And so actually related to that, like, is there right, wrong? At very least in the case of industry standards, Sergio's got a tools question. He's looking to learn some 3D stuff to know soon. Do you feel like there's an industry preference between Maya or 3D Max?
No.
Nope.
Naughty Dog was an all Maya house. I've seen other studios that are all Max houses. And then, I think Epic, I could be completely wrong. But if I remember correctly, I think Epic is Max on Geo. It might be Maya for animation. I'm not sure. But everything changes. Like, you could be in my house one year, and then all of a sudden, one of the tools gets so much better. And the programmers are like, oh, we need to put our stuff in that because it works better. This thing has bugs, and then everyone switches to that. Yeah, I mean, it's learn fundamentals. If you know the fundamentals, then if you learn the fundamentals and at least learn on one 3D package, if you can experiment across multiple 3D packages, like learn one really good and then figure out how to do those things in another, awesome. But every studio uses, like I said, the Activision, the COD studios, they're all using their tech, which has been around for ages, and it's all completely custom to them. Naughty Dog has their own custom in-house engine. Epic's using Unreal 4. Some companies are using Unreal 4. Some are using Source. Some are using Unity. Whatever. It's just a matter of, if you know the fundamentals and you're adaptable and you can easily go from one package to another. Same with the scripting language. If, like, for me, I know scripting fundamentals. I've worked in anything from like Python to like C style scripting languages to like Naughty Dog uses Lisp. You can laugh or cry. We cried. And it's, yeah, everyone's, you know, and was it Unreal 4's got blueprints. So you just have to be adaptable. But I know the fundamentals and I have the ability to adapt with that. So that's what makes it work.
Very relevant to that question. Dana's actually asking, with a current skill set and resume like yours and the background you have and all the things you've done, what challenges do you face in a job search? Because I think somebody.
I'm facing it now.
yeah. I mean, like, well,
it's a different market now. So like the last time I really had to like put my resume in the market was when I got my job at Naughty Dog, and that was 10 years ago. Because I went from Naughty Dog through ex Naughty Dogs into Infinity Ward, and then I got laid off in February. So back then, you know, it was kind of like, I think people would look at you to be like, oh, you have the skills, you have the resume or whatever it is, or whether you're starting out. Like they'd interview you, say like, yeah, you have the right mentality, you blend with the team, you got what we like, it's awesome, let's make them an offer, retire. And that's the way it was. Nowadays, I can only theorize as to why this is. My thinking is you know, modern day times with like smartphones and all this, you know, instant gratification and a million options at everyone's fingertips.
Cam's next question, which is especially because you've been in that position of hiring, even if it was a smaller environment or a while ago. Sure. What pathway or approach you see making most sense for people who are trying to find careers in the game industry? They don't have a degree, they don't have like shift experience in terms of professional stuff. As to like where you saw junior people coming out of, or what things you'd look for them to have done that helps set people apart.
I mean, doing what you guys are doing is one. I mean, just having a resume or a portfolio of some type. You know, make games, show that you can do it, show that you love the work. You know, show that you have an understanding of it, and at least be able to, especially at least from a design perspective, prove that you have the understanding of what is good design and stuff like that. You know, if you're a programmer, it's a little easier. You can say like, yeah, here's my programming stuff. Give me a programming test. Or an artist, you can pass the artist test. I'd say, yeah, that's the first one. And then, you know, it's hard. I mean, it's every studio is a little different, where some studios, they will have roles that are lesser paying, that they're like, okay, we can bring on some junior people and this is how you can get your break. And unfortunately, you're going to, you know, not necessarily have a fun time probably working on that project. It's going to break you in some way, shape, or form, but at least you're getting some experience. And then from where, once you ship something, then you can start moving around a little more and make friends and networking and stuff like that. I mean, that's another thing, is you can go to networking events, try to talk to people. Yeah, it's just one of those, you got to keep trying, but at least have stuff to show. Have stuff to show that as to how you've like, here's a thing I've designed. Here's a little web app I've designed. Here's a little thing I've designed in Unity or Unreal, or just stuff that you've worked on to showcase, like, yeah, I've been playing with this stuff. Because if you're just straight out, you know, like, yeah, I want to work here, and then it's like, well, what can you do? You've got nothing to show. It's very hard for the company to make that choice, because they're like,
yeah.
I have no idea.
And Mary had a related question too. Given the way the market is these days, she's wondering about the utility in terms of job seeking of networking. Is it still something where knowing a friend of a friend of a friend in industry is helpful, makes a difference?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's any industry. It's who you know. I mean, that's life. It's unfortunate, but yeah, life is a lot about who you know and who you make connections with. And yeah, the more you have that to pull on, the more to get you a foot in the door. I can't tell you how many times that's how people have gotten their jobs, because somebody knew somebody and they were able to push their resume to the front of the pile or give a good recommendation on their behalf to the recruiter or whatever. Granted, I've been approached by complete strangers as well, where I'm like, I can't do that for you because I don't know you. I'm not going to stick. You know, it's like, I'm not going to put my neck on the line and be like, yeah, this person's awesome, you should hire them, and also do hire them. And it's like, they don't know what they're doing. It's
right.
You know, no one's going to trust me anymore at that point if I do that. But yeah, making friends with people and be genuine, right? Don't, you know, people know when you're being like using snake or something like that. You know, don't be Hollywood. I mean, Chris, you live in LA?
I do. Yep.
Yeah. So, you know, like there's that kind of, you meet people on the street and they have this attitude of like, you say hi to them and their first thing is like, well, what can you do for me?
Right.
You know,
yeah.
Kind of,
how connected is this person?
Like that. You know, obviously be genuine. Like, go to like people. If you don't like someone, don't go be friends with them just because they think you can get you a job. But yeah, it definitely, who you know and who you make friends with they have a long lasting effect.
Right on. And Cam's asking, in regard to networking, is LinkedIn effective for networking in the game industry? Is it used by game industry people?
Yeah, I've gotten It definitely there's headhunters that scan LinkedIn all the time. That is definitely true. I've been getting some, I've got irons in the fire because of LinkedIn, so I'd say it's definitely a tool to use.
I'll also even throw out there, even for connections that don't come through LinkedIn, certainly any place that someone's want to work with me for contract work relationship, but otherwise they still look up and find my LinkedIn. So it's essentially a supplemental resume or whatever at that point.
Yeah.
Nick's asking, is it worth moving to a city with industry to get connections? He and actually a number of our members live places where like there's not local game industry there. Do you feel like that is the geographic?
It does make it harder. This is another thing because my wife and I were originally deciding like, we were thinking, do we move out of LA? Do we go somewhere else? But the problem we were having is there's only a couple of unless I'm going to go like and do an independent thing on my own. There really are only a couple cities where there are like companies to go work from,
right?
And it's just and the problem was some of the cities we didn't want to move to outright. I mean, we just didn't want to go to Seattle. We didn't want to go to San Francisco just because personally we didn't like either of those cities. Great cities, it's just not for us. It's not our, it doesn't fit us as people. So that's two major hubs that are just gone right there. But also, some of the, like I got an opportunity in one place in Oregon, and it was like amazing opportunity, but it would have meant my wife would have had to sacrifice her career. So trying to find a place where it's like she gets her good, she continues her career as well. We have a daughter now. We're going to raise where we want to raise her, but that's right for my career. So we decided, all right, let's keep looking in LA because it just seemed to fit. But yeah, it's a lot harder unless you're going to go the indie route and you're going to start doing, and you're going to collaborate online, which is totally doable these days. There's absolutely no, like look at Vlambeer. I mean, they're based out of,
Amsterdam.
Netherlands.
Yeah.
Netherlands. Thank you. I was going to say Denmark. I'm like,
Jan Wilhelm stays there. Rami any given day is somewhere else in the world, right? Which is a proof again of like the online collaboration is quite doable.
Yeah. And then they have I think they have a couple people there.
Yeah.
But they have people that work for them all over the world.
Yeah. Contractors all over the place.
Yeah. So
it's in much the same pattern we're working in here for what it's worth, just on obviously larger time scales of effort and energy and stuff. And as another to those city hubs, and so we have run into the same problem for my fiance's and advertising agencies, marketing agencies, and likes that if when one of her companies dissolved or merged or whatever, there were so many other options in the LA area. Because one of the things that happens is even if there's like a game company in Missouri, in other places where like there's different trade-offs to live there, if something happens to that one or you want to find other options, it can be tougher than where there's like you say, a city hub where there's so many other companies in the area to at least put a fishing line out there. Sergio's asking about how do you see the gaming industry changing in the next 3 to 5 years?
It's a good question. Is there a specific aspect?
Yeah, Sergio, is there any specific aspect the question?
Like you asking in terms of how you think games are going to be, like what types of games are going to be made?
So the angle he's coming from specifically is he's thinking of starting building skills so that he's as useful as possible in 3 to 5 years. So from that angle.
It's a hard one because I'm noticing. I don't know. It's a weird thing in that, like, there are certain types of games that are maybe only becoming more of like certain established AAA studios, like the story-based game, like that can sell well. Those are becoming harder to do, and it's harder to get into that kind of stuff. But but something like more like the Overwatch type of game, or people are trying to copy the League of Legends and get that kind of like mass appeal. Because even COD's waning, to some, their numbers are going down to a certain extent. And even so, it's like last I heard, I think the majority of players are actually playing zombies. Like they buy the game for zombies. It was some staggering statistic because I remember when we started Infinite Warfare, it was like I wasn't on the third team, they called it, which did that mode. Originally, they were like, no, we're going to do an alien mode. We don't want to do zombies. It's, let's try to separate ourselves. And then when they saw the stats, they're like, doing zombies. It was just too many people bought the game and only played zombies. It was a staggering number. And it's like, okay. So I don't know. I guess there's some questions to be had about that in terms of like, what kind of games are selling, what kind of games are making the money, because those are the studios that learn to adapt to the ones that are going to go out, be better for that. But at the same time, when it comes to design, it's still fundamentals, right? It's still, whether you're going to design for Overwatch or you're going to design for COD or you're going to design for Uncharted or whatever the frick, core design principles are always in play. It's just a matter of, that's where that adaptability comes in terms of like, okay, if it's Overwatch, okay, then that means I need to immerse myself in the world of Overwatch and understand what people like about this and how the mechanics work in this kind of game. You still need to iterate on stuff. You still need to test, still need to focus test, still need to be as light as you can, so you can iterate as much as you can without locking yourself into, you don't want to lock yourself into like heavy art changes, for example, early when you're like, oh, hold on, we don't know how the level's supposed to be laid out, because now it makes the level 10 times harder to change. That example. So, I mean, all those fundamentals are still there. It's just a matter of whether or not a company may or may not hire you based on what you're like. So, and this is kind of a problem for me in some regards, because like there's some games I like, some games I don't like, and I just don't have a time to play on games anymore. Even, either I'm working or I have a kid or I'm doing other things. It's like I keep abreast of the industry and I play a lot of stuff that I can, but I'm also, I know what kind of personality I have. If I get into Overwatch, my wife won't ever see me again. Of course, that's not good.
Right.
So, I don't have time to jump into those kind of games and spend hundreds of hours in them anymore. That can cost me some opportunities, because they'll be like, well, we really need you for this company. And I'm like, you tell them, like, yeah, of course that's where I need to be, then I will jump into that part and parcel. And if I know I have an interview coming up, I'll play that game for a little bit. To get a flavor for it so I can understand it. But yeah, it's just there's that. That's another element you have to consider as well, is like maybe the more versed you are, I guess, across the market in terms of like being able to play a ton of different stuff, that can help you, because then you have a bit more understanding of it. Or if you want to specialize and be like, no, these are the kind of games I think are going to be big, I'm going to go start focusing on these. Now, granted, there's risk with that, but right. In the end, it's still going to require fundamentals.
Right on. So Mary's actually asking about, what do you think the likelihood is of major and or minor game companies letting people work long distance for them? Because I feel like I've been hearing there's been a rise in the amount of contract work going on. I don't know how much that's remote, how much that's in-house, where they, let them use their office while they're doing it. Have you been seeing that going on at different scales?
It depends on the department and it depends on the tech. Obviously art, sure. You can contract art and animation. You can contract art and animation. They can be anywhere in the world. That's an easy thing to do, because you can just do it all in Maya, send the source file over, and then the company puts it in the game and tries it. Design is a lot harder, because you have to have a working copy of the game, and usually there's a custom tool set of some type, and that makes it much more difficult. Like, for example, the way Naughty Dog set up, I don't think you couldn't really have an offsite design department. It'd be very difficult. Programming, yes and no. Again, it also depends if you're making like PC games or an indie game or something like that. Sure. If you're doing console games where everyone has to have a dev kit, that also increases problems, because now that company either has to send you a dev kit or you have to have one yourself, and I don't think you can get one yourself. They're ridiculously expensive, and Sony and Microsoft have extreme processes to get these things in the first place. So yeah, it kind of really depends on the department, and it depends on the team, and it depends on the game, and it depends on the tech. But yeah, it is. I am seeing some contractors coming in. Yeah.
One sort of middle ground that I think was especially I don't know if it was the bubble of it or if it's still around, but certainly going on a decade ago when we worked together, was this thing where like the giant big company, the AAA studio, would hire out smaller, essentially contract house company to work on our multiplayer for us, work on the whatever for us, make it fit our stuff, but make us not have to worry about it. Is that still going on, or was that like a little industry tryout thing? It kind of hadn't stuck around.
I think that's still going on. Infinite Warfare, we did that. We had a couple of, like, one contract studio that they'll bring them in house for like 6 months, like saying, here, we're going to set up your 12-man team in that office over there, or on this floor plan, go, then they'll work, and then, all right, contract's up, then they go back to whatever they're doing. I know we did it at EA. There was it Pineapple or whatever it was?
I think Demiurge maybe did multiplayer for Airborne. I don't know about
Demiurge, but there was also like Pineapple Studios down in Orange County or something.
Right.
Papaya. That was yeah. They were doing some stuff for like the parachute in drop and all this stuff. So that's a little bit easier. Is like when you have whole departments like that, and you can farm off a thing to them where they have an office, and then they can have a copy of the game themselves, and dev kits or whatever. That's different. Yeah, I don't know how much of that there is, though.
I just like to highlight those because those are often off people's radar, so they're under less of an avalanche of resumes or competition, but it's still a chance for somebody to get on their resume credentials having worked on the DLC for Mass Effect or the whatever for some brand and game that people have heard of with access to dev kits, etc.
Totally.
Mary's also asking about how often do game companies take in interns? And I know it's
they have their regular intervals. It's per company. A lot of times it'll usually be my guess, because it's something I don't really pay full lot of attention to. I mean, obviously there's QA. That's a big one, but that's probably the hardest, not the hardest thing to get into, but it's definitely the hardest division to work in. It's by far the most thankless job, I think, in the industry. And that's unfortunate because it's one of the most important. So there's that side of it. I think when they start ramping up into production and as they get closer to like finaling, they might. There's a certain line where it's like you can't bring in people at a certain point of project because it takes too long to train them. So that you just have to stick it out and make it work. You might be able to bring in one or two people to do some like real menial needs to get done across the entire game. Like someone needs to go through and check all our collisions. Someone needs to go through and check all our nav mesh. All that kind of stuff. That'll happen. But to get in at a certain time, I like bigger companies like EA and Ubisoft. I don't know if Activision does. Will partner with certain colleges and bring in interns to work for a certain period of time on a project. But I've also seen for certain tasks, that like a company when it's time to staff up, like at the production part, then they can bring in interns for either a certain amount of months or to finish the project. And it's like a contract position, and then maybe they'll hire you at the end full time. But it's ongoing. I mean, I wouldn't say there's any time of year or anything like that happens. You just have to keep circling back with the companies and just keep pinging them, being like, "Hey, you looking for internships? I'd love to come. Whatever."
Right. Ignacio's asking, what do you think about VR? And is it something you've done work in? Is it something that you're kind of waiting to see like the rest of us?
I just recently got an Oculus and I've only had a chance to dabble with it a little bit. I think it's awesome. Like it's one of those things. I think it will become big at some point, but it's going to take a while. And I don't think it's games that are going to do it. This is my opinion. I think it's going to take things like Facebook. I'm guessing maybe most of you have read Ready Player One. That to me is what's going to make VR popular. And that's exactly what Mark Zuckerberg's trying to do. So when you see things like Facebook doing it, and then all of a sudden it can become in classrooms and you can start teaching people worldwide through VR. People can have remote concert experiences, remote surgeries, like whatever the heck it's going to be something other than games that pushes that technology to become mass marketable. And then people are going to want it in their house. Because right now even the freaking, I love it. It was cool, but you have to experience it to fully understand how good it is. You can understand the concept and be like, it's interesting. But once you put it on and try it, that's when you understand the wow factor. But there's two freaking sensors with wires. There's the headset itself, which is a bunch of wires. Then there's the remote freaking controllers in my hands at the thing, and then there's the remote itself to click through. I can't just put away like a console controller in a TV cabinet and be like, okay, I'm done for the night. No, you have to like hammer it up and dedicate it into an actual space. And I don't know many people that are going to be able to do that. Like our living room is not huge, but I've got like a 5x5 area I can stand in, but I have to clear everything out of it. And then I have to set up my laptop in front of the TV and, to put all this stuff up. And it's like, and then I have to calibrate everything. It's just, there's too many costs, too many barriers to entry. So like somehow it needs to get to a point where like either it's a single sensor that goes on a TV or, something, and then it's wireless and it just goes on a charging unit and it just sits there like a PS4 controller and it's all tucked away. It doesn't require some ridiculously beefy high-end PC. I mean, it's probably like why PlayStation VR is like, it's like one of the better performing VR units, I think, or something like that, because it's easy, and the way that it ties in is it doesn't need, you don't have to constantly pack this computer up and you still have to dedicate a decent amount of space to it. But yeah, so once people, I think, see the potential and they're willing to overcome some of these problems, I think that's when that's when it'll get really huge. Otherwise, it's just going to be like it is now. It'll be a growing niche market of like, several million users. People can definitely make a living off of it. You can make fun games and, people would like it. There's a lot of things I'd love to experiment with it. It's a fascinating potential. It's just, like anything, you can only sell as big as your market base, as big as your user base is. So
I know several people who are in VR, and their issue is even when they release a good game that's featured in the store, and they're just like, the headsets just aren't there yet. There's just the market of buyers isn't there yet numerically. We've got a question. Got a question from Cam of importance of designing what's trending as opposed to what you enjoy. And if I can kind of, I think maybe frame that question in particular, like, so when you talk about, hiring junior kind of people, how did you gauge? I mean, if two people come to you and one of them is really doing projects they're passionate about, but it doesn't seem like what's really popular in the market, as opposed to somebody who has kind of maybe a service, duty work mentality of like, this is what's popular, this is what I studied, this is what I build. How do you kind of gauge those two as to what's important?
I'd say, I think it's bad to segregate yourself into either camp in the first place. I would say you need to, again, unless you're going to go the indie route, or you're going to work with a really small team and do it your way. That's a very hard thing for companies to hire. You need to be able to work with a team. You need to be able to realize that, like, sometimes your ideas will make it into the game. Sometimes they won't. It's more important to find a company that allows freedom of expression in terms of like being able to like have an opinion without any form of without any worry about recourse or anything like that. It's more about, I can have my say, I can point out my things, I can give my feedback, my suggestions, and I'll be taken seriously. And it's an environment that allows for that to happen. And you just have to have that realization. There's going to be times when you just have to, you toe the line and you got to do what the game requires. And there's going to be times when you can prototype new features and systems and get a chance to try stuff. If the company is going in a direction that you don't like, and you have enough experience or enough ability to go get another job, that's another reason why people change. Some people are like, I don't like the direction the studio's going in anymore. I think it's very bad. I want to go someplace that's in this direction or whatever.
Right. Well, and as another question about sort of your process and your mentality about it. I mean, so sometimes I think people idolize, or at least press has an easy time writing about, where it seems like there's like a stubborn designer, the Steve Jobs figure, the I don't even want to call attention to bigger game designers for any pluses or minuses, as opposed to ones who are much more like, we got to try it. We don't know until we try it, and it's the team's consensus or whatever. Where do you kind of fall in that spectrum, or how do you see that professionally?
I think the studios that do it best are the ones that they listen to their teams. Like Naughty Dog was a very flat structure in terms of feedback. Now, granted, Bruce and Neil and and Evan and or whether it was Amy or whoever, they carried a vision, and there is definitely like a direction that the game that the company is making is going in, that things have to fall in line with. But you were free to, you could recommend anything. You could say like, hey, I think this might fit in our universe. What do you think? And if there was time to prototype it and try it, or if you wanted to come in on a weekend and give it a shot and willing to put it on, they were very much about like, well, show us it. Is it cool? Yes. Awesome. Then we'll see if we can get it in the game. If not, then, we do the schedule or not, then we'll have to wait, but we'll put it on a list for later so we remember it. But otherwise it's definitely, I totally lost my train of thought. Sorry.
No problem. No. I think I covered the territory and reaching near the end anyway. But so maybe I'll put one last question from Sergio, and then a couple short questions I was end on. So Sergio's asking: are the small companies competing with big companies, or the small companies serving the big companies, or what's that balance?
It's a bit of both. I mean, there's some small companies that are making. I mean, the whole smaller indie / that side of things has opened up, and I don't even know. Like any art market, right? Some of those guys have gotten success, and now their companies have grown. Like, can you really call it indie anymore?
Right.
But it is in the sense that they're not owned by anyone. So I'd say like, there's that space of competition, and some of those games do take market share away from some of the larger games. But I don't know. It's like, to me, I think the market is definitely growing, and there is a ton of different avenues to explore stuff. I mean, mobile is very risky, but it's still an option. It's still an optional space. There's still casual games on a PC. There's educational games. There's console games. There's, tablet, there, VR, whatever, PC, and all different budgets and all different shapes and sizes. There's markets for a lot of it. It's just a matter of who goes into what space. And some are more volatile than others.
I'll often throw in there, a lot of what I see is actually companies that are juggling both, because they're keeping their lights on by being in service of bigger companies while developing their own IP, which is not paying off yet. I've seen lots of that, at least in the smaller houses. So actually, one last question, because I think it's important. Mary's asking about, how has treatment of female employees been in your experience? I think a lot of people have heard either stories of women in game industry, whether it's Gamergate type things, whether it's people who've had a tough time. or if that's something you feel is improving, if that's something you haven't seen.
I mean, how women are treated in this industry? Was that right? Okay. The companies I've worked at, fine. I mean, I've never seen a company where it was like people went out of their way and like did like the whole programmer bit. There might have been maybe a few employees there, but if they did that, they would be so shot down. Because most of the people I know in the companies, again, the big companies I've worked at, which is most of what I worked at. Yeah, it's been very. I mean, they're very specific. Also, have like diversity clauses because they understand lawsuits happen. So they're also very adamant about it. I mean, it's one of those things. Sometimes somebody might say like, I'm not really a fan of that. Would you mind not saying that around me? It's like, okay, you'd be respectful. I've never seen anything that's like like what you see with like a lot of people, like for example, when Gamergate hit, 99% of the people I know were against it in this industry. They thought it was disgusting and just stupid. We don't know, I understand who these people, well, you understand who these people are, but like, seriously, what the F, man, what's wrong with you? But in terms of like, treatment, yeah, I've not personally noticed anything. There's like personal one-on-one things that I don't see. I've always gone out of my way to make sure that I'm friendly and nice. I'm like, you're another person in this industry for a reason. I treat you like I would any other human being.
That's great to hear, especially since you've had visibility in multiple kinds of companies and stuff.
There needs to be more women just coming into it to help change minds and change ideas, and that's a hard thing. That's a societal thing. That's people need to. Like when we have our daughter, my wife and I are extremely adamant about this. It's like, no, there's going to be no, oh, here's a doll, here's pink, here's all this stuff. It's like, no, I'm going to teach you programming. I'm going to teach you how to go shoot things. I'm going to go teach you how to play games. I'm going to teach you, to play in the mud. You want to fix a car? I'm going to teach you to fix a car. Whatever she has an interest in, I am going to do that. It's not going to be, oh, no, let the guys do that. Because
right. Girls aisle, boys aisle in the toy store, that mess.
And that's just got to stop. Like that kind of stereotype is what causes women to not go into these fields. I mean, yes, there's harassment and other things as well, but I think some of that also extends from the way we were raised. So, I mean, it's going to be a long process, but we just need to find a way to get more diversity in the workplace itself, and not just women. I mean, people of all types, all races, all nationalities, sexes, and whatever genders. It just once you get that, then you'll get more of the melting pot. But unfortunately, yeah, it is. I think Naughty Dog was probably the most diverse place I've worked at, and they were about 20% women. There were a lot of women there for a video game company, but it was still only came out at 20%, unfortunately. And,
right. Well, and so the thing I was like to close on is just your Twitter handles, websites, anything they can look up to follow your thinking, to learn more about you, any of that kind of stuff you want to share.
Twitter handle is at one word, the Elmagoo. So it's TheElmagoo. Don't ask, old nickname from like high school. But yeah, so it's at the Elmagoo. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just search Benson Russell. There's my name up there. You can do that. Hey, my wife's home. And yeah, that's about it. I mean, those are probably the best two places to find me.
Gotcha. Well, sweet. And so we got to close up, but I want to thank you so much for taking time today to join us. It's been great. Thanks so much for the discussion, for the questions.
Yeah, thank you, Benson.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
And that's the end of the meeting. So I'll see you all around the Slack forum. Thanks again, Benson.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anytime. If you need, I can come back some other time too. Whatever. It's all good.
All right. Thanks so much. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Have a good one.
Bye.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Music at the start and end of this podcast is provided by Danny Baranowski. Use with permission.